Hi, everyone. Richard Carlton here. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training at FMTrain.tv, where every day at this time slot, we are having a ton of fun learning about the Claris FileMaker platform. As a reminder, we have today, tomorrow, and Friday, and then we will be off on Monday. So very, very important. There's a holiday, national holiday in the United States. So that'll be a day off on Monday. And then Tuesday, we're starting a 60-day set of training days where every day we're going to progressively build your knowledge for basic users and get you to kind of a intermediate level as best we can. That is our strategy at the moment. So normally every day our recordings are free, but during that 60-day training, if you want the recordings, you need to have part of one of our basic training bundles. It's an annual subscription. And so that'll be, so those of you can put a couple bucks in to help keep the operation running when we get that far. With that in mind, let's pivot into today's conversation. So I got a note from someone in the FileMaker community said, hey, there's this guy named Kevin Frank. He cured prostate cancer last week. He's working on cures for other cancers, and he's such an amazing individual. And so we should have him on the show and have him talk about how he does FileMaker and how he cures cancer, which is very exciting. So I want to welcome Kevin Frank. Now, for those of you wondering about Kevin, he has a really awesome blog called FM
FileMaker Hacks.
Hacks. I was thinking FileMaker Geeks, but not, that'll work too. Anyway, FileMaker Hacks, and it's really not hacky, I don't think. I mean, maybe it was once upon a time, but there's some pretty serious content in there. And back in the day, he documented, he didn't create it, I don't believe, but he documented the anchor buoy stuff. And it became kind of the de facto repository for what we have today. So it was actually created by another individual, but Kevin, I think, helped document it and preserve the material. It was not created or endorsed or otherwise by Claris. It has nothing to do with Claris and FileMaker. The community frequently creates things we need, and that's what that was all about. So with that in mind, Kevin is whether you understand it or not, all of your lives have been touched by Kevin. And so we actually brought him in today to talk about a topic, and he's a little nervous. He thinks you people are out to get him. So we want to welcome everyone here today. Please be nice, play nice in the sandbox with Kevin. We love Kevin. And Margaret, what is the topic for today with Kevin? Because Kevin could present on 1,000 topics. What are we doing today?
Okay, you're asking me?
Yeah.
Custom functions in JSONQuery. So we're going to be doing some deep dive into JSON custom functions, which will be extremely interesting. I really don't know a lot of detail beyond that. This is going to be a more advanced stream where we're kind of like immediately assume you have some base level knowledge and then jump right into the pool. So
welcome, Kevin. Welcome, Kevin. How are you, sir?
Fantastic. How are you?
Good, good, good. So, why don't we take over? You can tell us about what you do, or
All right. So the first thing I'll just say is I'm gonna not do a ton of slides, but I'm gonna do a few slides to get us started. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about JSON custom functions today, and you can see here we've got a resource page, and the resource page is just go to FileMakerHacks.com. It's the current article, and I've got links to other things I've posted about or written about with JSON. And also in the second half, we're going to talk about JSONQuery, which is an amazing custom function. And just as you said that with Anchor Buoy, I sort of popularized something, but I didn't invent it. Same thing here. I've been evangelizing it because it's this amazing Swiss Army knife with like 1,000 blades for processing JSON. But I'm also going to talk about some other JSON custom functions first, and then we'll get into the JSON query. I'm back here, and a little bit about me. I've got 30 years experience as a full-time FileMaker developer, technical lead on Cadence's Genesis Transactions product. This is my blog. It's got more than 250 articles, and there's my logo. So I've got a few goals for today. I just want to convey some of the depth and breadth of what you can do with JSON custom functions. And the assumption is that if you're here, that you do work with JSON and that you'd like to see some things to either improve your productivity or give you some magic powers that you don't normally have when working with JSON, or maybe you spend a lot of time writing while loops or scripted loops to solve JSON problems and you're wondering if there's an easier way. Fast-paced, I'm not going to do any long-winded code explanations. So we're going to focus on what, not how. I like to say all killer, no filler, except use at your own risk. A lot of these are work in progress, And
Lawyering makes the world go round. There's your
there we
lawyering.
go. There we go. So let's get started. And again, there's the resource page, FileMakerHacks.com.
I
And
highly recommend that. So if I interrupt, it's not because I think I just want to make sure that I'm emphasizing his blog articles are phenomenal. In fact,
thank you.
if it was me, I'd have every blog he'd come on the show and talk about it. But I can't get too greedy with people, but it's that kind of content. It's really phenomenal. So, okay.
Thank you for saying so, Richard. All right. So let's take a look at some JSON custom functions, and I have a custom function sandbox hiding back here somewhere. I was telling Richard, I recently blundered into a great keyboard shortcut on the Macintosh, which I'm guessing a lot of you know, but just for those who don't, it's command backtick. So once I've got FileMaker on the screen, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm in FileMaker, but I'm not looking at the file, even though I know it's open. So if I press command backtick, that's the key. It's under the tilde. Well, it shares the key with the tilde, and it's under the escape key on a normal keyboard. So then we go, oh, CF Sandbox, there I am. So what it does is command backtick cycles you through your open apps, or your open documents within a given app. Whereas command tab cycles you through your apps. But command backtick, which is just above the tab, cycles you through your open documents within your whatever app you're in on the Mac. Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to bang through these, and you guys will interrupt if you have questions or if you think it's appropriate to have me clarify something. So has this ever happened to you? You've got some JSON, maybe it's an array of arrays, and once you format it, and by the way, I've just pointed out I've got some keyboard shortcuts here to unformat it and apply JSON format elements. And then some of your rows are horizontal and some of your rows are vertical. Well, I don't know about you, but I find this disconcerting. So what I did was I wrote a JSON format 2D to make a two-dimensional JSON entry. So effectively take each thing and put it on its own line. What's really funny is the meta. So you can get into this meta thing where you start using your custom functions to fix your demo about your custom functions, which I'll explain in a second. So here I have a couple scripts here, unformat input and format input. And I was going to, and I thought, there's only one problem with that. Yes.
I know you're gonna have a problem, but the question is, are those functionally identical? Is this visual, or are they actually not functionally identical?
They are functionally identical in the sense that this is valid JSON. I can apply JSON functions to this and it won't break.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So just another way of looking at it. Remember, white space doesn't count in JSON, right?
Okay. Right.
So, okay. So at any rate, I thought about this and I thought, I've got at least one example in here that if I apply JSON format elements to this, it's not actually going to be JSON on the input. It's going to kill it. It's going to zap it. So I only want my format and unformat functions to work if this is indeed valid JSON, right? So I came in here, and the first thing I did was I took this thing and I said, okay, set the element type, and then let's use this JSON get element type function. Look at the input, and then say, is it an object or is it an array? And if it's one of those two things, then it's valid JSON. So we'll apply it, right? And then I thought, wait a minute. My session is on JSON custom functions. I ought to have a JSON function to do this for me. And then I thought, wait a minute, I do have a JSON function to do that. JSON is valid. So when I do JSON is valid, as you can see, it just makes my life a little easier. I don't have to go through this song and dance. This come up here. So what that means now is I'm not going to accidentally kill my example because what was in the input was not valid JSON, because there are a few examples where for intentional reasons, I don't have JSON as the input. End of digression. Yeah, so JSON format 2D, here it is just working on, I call this a two-dimensional array. It's an array of arrays is another way to put it. In the next example, well, we've got something, if I unformat it, it's a bunch of gibberish. If I format it, we kind of have the same problem. This is an object, but each key has an array hanging off of it within the object. And same thing, when I applied JSON format elements, it decided some of the lines were too long and it was going to help me out by making them vertical. And I didn't want to be helped out that way. So same deal, right? And I do this and it just satisfies my OCD, but it also makes it really, one of the beauties of JSON is it's human readable. And so this makes it more readable for me as I'm keeping track of what I'm doing here. Again,
Yeah,
the
I
details
agree. I agree.
and the
Yeah.
details are not important here of what I'm doing, right? It's just, I'm just showing a formatting trick. And then finally, this is probably less valuable. This is where the formatting comes in really handy, right? Okay, I've got a complex object, it's, and I just got some arrays in it, more objects within arrays within objects. And like, okay, this looks great. But what would happen if I applied JSON format 2D to that? It'll still try to give me something useful. So it's hard to tell here, but it's put each entry on its own line, and it's treating that as one line because that's the value hanging off the invoices key. And so it has put it on its own line, but because of the screen resolution, I can't show you that easily. But that's what it's doing. So I don't use, again, it's a tool, and use it if it helps you. And one thing I was thinking about, as far as all this goes, I'm not being prescriptive and saying, hey, you should use these. I'm saying, here are some tools. If you find them useful, use them. So here's an interesting one in FileMaker 21, aka FileMaker 2024, that came out
Oh,
recently.
thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Please. Thank you. Oh my
Yes,
God.
yes. Okay.
I'm going to have a coronary over here just getting.
I can tell that you've given a lot of thought to this, Rich. So here we are, right? We've got the ability to make an array. And what I've done is I've put some, and this is actually an example of something that isn't JSON. It's got a little bit of JSON in it, but this is just a list and with an empty row, and then it's got an address, right? So they've given us this thing called JSON make array. And I had already written one years ago called JSON format 2D. Oh no, called JSON array from list, sorry. And so the question is, am I still ever going to use mine, given that they've now given us one out of the box? Both of these are designed to take a list and automagically generate JSON from it. So I've got these two here. Option 7, one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts to add a Pilcrow. At first glance, it looks like they're doing the same thing, but check this out. We got 1 point plus 1 on this line. JSON make array decided, oh, that's a number, and just put the 1. JSON make array, okay, said, oh, 123 Main Street. I see a number. That must be a number, right? JSON make array said, oh, you've got a zip code that starts with a 0. That's a number, and took it away. So one of my goals was to properly produce JSON. In some cases, it's a value judgment that I made. And
it's miscasting? I mean, and this is a much deeper topic in and of itself, but it's
yes.
miscasting is what it's doing.
Yeah, so what's happening is we're telling it figure it out, right? And the reason why is there's different things here. Look, we got an object on row 1, an array on row 2, right? What should be a text string, but that it and here too, right? All of these should be text strings.
All right. This is the
right?
part where you take a drink and I talk for a second. Okay. So when I talk about casting real quick, everyone, when you define a field, you tell FileMaker what is in the field. Generally in SQL, you do the same thing. When you define a variable, as an example, FileMaker still has to, you don't see it, but it has to decide if it's going to be a text in the variable or a date or a number or some other stuff like that. And what it can do is it can misguess for you. And so there's a little bit of guessing going on here. And when you get something that miscast, you'll have behavior like this that's really not great. So anyway.
So one of the things is to be explicit generally and don't trust FileMaker necessarily. This business of figuring things out but there's a reason you wouldn't want to call everything a string, which is then when you bring it back, it's not, if you bring it back with JSON get element, it's not going to be treated as a number unless you put get as number around it. So the general rule is you want to type things properly. If you get away with casting numbers as strings, sooner or later it's going to bite you, but you may get away with it for a while. So I'm not generally a fan of custom functions that require other custom functions sort of to be engines within them. But then, as often happens, when I really needed to do it, I was quite happy to make an exception. And so the thing that I did was I made a custom function called JSON get value type, and its job is to figure out. And so I've got 124 test cases here. I have 2 versions of this file. One's for countries where they use a comma as a decimal separator, whereas in the US we use a dot as a decimal separator. This is the dot version. And then, so I set up all these different test cases. I did this with the help of Steve Semterera, the author of JSONQuery, by the way. He suggested it. And but yeah, you want to build test cases and try to break it really hard. So the deal in this file, and this is linked on the resource page, is that when you click find 0, that means there's a problem because they aren't matching. And that's what we want to see. That means they all match. So click 0, click, and it tells you up here. No records found means all tests passed. So like with all my custom functions, I expect people to open them up and change them. And so if you change it, I would highly recommend you make test cases and make sure it can pass all the test cases if you modify it. Okay, so that's an engine in a lot of my custom functions. So I'm gonna move on here. JSON dedupe array.
So slow down a second. So you said that's an engine in a lot of your other other material. Okay, right.
Okay, so as an example, I said I don't want to do long-winded code explanations, but if we just look in here, right, and we had JSON array from list, right? Dependency, JSON get value type, right? And somewhere in here, it's figuring out the type for you. So, because think about it, right? You're feeding a bunch of arbitrary stuff to a custom function. You're saying, hey, make JSON from this. It has to figure out the type. So that's what it's doing. So this one's JSON dedupe array, right? And that's just the idea that if we have an array and it has duplication in it, as I do in this one, it's called alpha, and then this one called cities, right? In both cases, I've got some duplication, as you can see. So what I did was I just put this little query together to extract those two arrays, and then apply JSON dedupe array to the two. And then when we do that, we'll see they're both now deduplicated. I intentionally did not sort them here. I just said, I said take them in the order you find them and remove duplicates. So that's what it's doing. So the order is respected, it's just the duplication is removed. And then of course, naturally I thought, well, what if I wanted to sort something in an array? That turned out to be a can of worms because once again, like, well, what am I sorting? But so I decided to just this I actually threw together yesterday. So I thought, okay, let's just make it sort as text, and not even worry about ascending or descending. At first I was gonna put all these arguments on it. And but then I thought, no, just keep it simple. Most of the time people do this, they're just gonna want to alphabetize something. So that's what that does. So this isn't deduplicating, but of course I could combine those two, right? So if I wanted, on the previous example, right, if I also wanted to sort it, right, I could wrap the sort and put this inside of it, and then we'd get a sorted version if we want. So here, let's do it here. So if I say JSON dot sort array as text and put that there, right? There we go. So now I just sorted the second one, right? So that's one of the beauties of FileMaker, right? Is that functions can be wrapped around other functions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I do not have a handy dandy reset function in here. So I'm gonna.
Beverly's clapping for you. She thinks that's pretty awesome. That's good stuff. Yeah.
Well, I've learned more from Beverly than almost any other FileMaker developer on the planet. So thank you, Beverly. All right, here we go. JSON from text array. So here's something that might come back from SQL, right? You throw out a SQL query. And so let's pretend we've already done that. And this is just the result. And then, so this is a more complicated one that I wrote, but it kind of had to be, right? So this is just saying, okay, here we go. Here's my array, and I'm assuming a two-dimensional array. It's just a text array, right? But it's got column separators, which are the pipe. That's funny. These pipes lined up perfectly, so it looks like a vertical line, right? When I say pipe, right, I mean the shift and then the key that would have a backslash if it weren't shifted. That's the pipe symbol. And that was specified as the column delimiter. Of course, if we leave the row delimiter empty, then it's going to just be a hard return expected. And so when I run this thing, it's just going to turn this into what. Notice I didn't say JSON object or JSON array in terms of what I'm making. I'm just saying what the source is, right? I've got a text array here. And so the way I set this up was if you leave that empty, it'll make an array, or really an array of arrays, right? But if we go on to the next example, it's the same input. For some reason, one's bold and one isn't. Okay. same input, same function, but now I've provided the names that I want to give to these fields effectively, right? So I'm basically applying field names, if you will, or maybe we'd be able to say JSON key names. So now the thing says, oh, he gave me an optional key list. He must want an object. So same function, but it figures it out based on if this fourth argument is empty or not. So then it makes the an array of objects, whereas on the previous one, it was an array of arrays. Same data, just different way of structuring it. JSON merge objects. We've got two JSON objects here, and I intentionally duplicated the capital. And I heard a rumor that Kalamazoo isn't actually the capital of Kuwait. But,
Okay.
but down here, there's an alternative, right? So when I merge the second one, this only takes two arguments, or takes two objects. It's not infinite, right? It takes two objects. And the second one will take priority over the first. So that means when we do this, now it's merged the two objects and
Okay, so it's assuming that the second one entered, if it's a duplicate, is in fact the correct option because it was the most recent. Is that what the logic is?
Exactly. And if you think about cycling through here and saying JSON set element, if it processed this one first, it would set it here, and then a moment later would come down here and overwrite it with this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then merging arrays is actually a little more interesting than merging objects. With merging objects, it's just, hey, we got two things, merge them, right? With arrays, it turns out we get to decide how we want the blending. It's sort of like blend this into one array, but maybe it's not just as simple as, well, let's start with this. Simple concatenation, leave the third argument empty. It's just going to glue them together. So here we've got two arrays, click refresh, now we have one array, right? And they've been blended. But maybe
just lose the 9 on the end. Okay.
Right, that was with the third argument empty, right? And that's probably the standard use case for this. But maybe instead, we want to put B at the beginning, right? So in this case, we're going to specify 0, which for this CF means before the beginning. So I click refresh, right? And now someone might say, yeah, but you could have just swapped A and B, and that's what we're showing here. So this is just saying, look, just swap A and B, and you don't have to specify anything there, right? That would work also. But maybe we want to put A into the middle of B, right? So I've specified 2, and as we know, it's a 0-based index, so 0, 1. So it should show up right between these two zeros. The 9 9s should appear, and sure enough, it does.
What would it do if there was 5 zeros?
You know what? That's a great question. Let's do it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to argue that now we're going to have 3 zeros over here. That's my prediction, right? That we'll have 0, 0, 9, 9, 0, 0, 0. And sure enough, we do.
There you go.
Okay. Because the address didn't change, right? Then the next one is, what if we try to what if I use a negative number? What if I'm saying, hey, put this back before, put these 99s back, but several positions back before. And it says, okay. And it just pads it out with nulls.
Oh, it can insert nulls. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, whenever you specify a further forward, if you will, or further back JSON address, it always has to pad it out with nulls automatically to fill it, because otherwise the position wouldn't be respected. So that wasn't any special programming I did, right? That was just a standard behavior. So what if we go after, right? Now I've put 6, right? But there's only 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 here, right? So I'm saying, yeah, put it at position 6, right? So kind of same thing, but now it's gone forward, right? Said, okay, you wanted me to insert it at position 6 effectively, right? So I had to pad out nulls to get to position 6. So then I could do what you said. But then, of course, the question is, yeah, but this business of having to know, that's kind of weird, right? So what if instead I said, look, I want to be 2 greater than this, but I don't know how long this is, right? And I don't want to stop and figure it out, right? Instead of counting.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that now we've got a new custom function we're adding to the blend called JSON array length. So it's going to figure out how long A is. It's going to add 2 to it, and then it's going to do it, right? So at first we're going to see exactly the same result we saw in the previous. See, I'm popping back and forth between my 2 examples there. Right? But instead, count it. So now when you said what would happen if I added some additional entries, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we add some more entries here, and it's going to say, okay, whatever this length is, I'm going to add 2 to it before I give you the 9s. Right? Oh no, sorry. Right. Right. That's what it did. I put all the zeros. So it
Yes.
still put it 2 after whatever the length was. So that just figures out how long your array is, right? And again, this is something you could do very easily without using a custom function. But if you're trying to move fast, and if you've got this in your toolkit, you'll move faster with this rather than the standard trick, right? The standard trick would be JSON list the keys and now give me the value count of the keys. That would be the equivalent of this. So anyone who's worked with JSON much probably has that pattern set up in their head and can do it in their sleep, because it's something we need to do fairly often, especially before FileMaker 21, when they gave us the new plus operator, which automatically says, hey, go to the end. But even that I couldn't really use here because I have to add this to it. Moving along. Oh, this one's kind of fun. Insert array element. So what we're doing here is, believe it or not, there is no obvious way to insert something into an array, right? To say, hey, shove everything over, right? A, B, C, D, E. And I'm literally saying, I want to take this new thing and put it in here and push everything over. Like, it seems, to me, it's like a mystery why we don't have this function in FileMaker, because it just makes sense. So I ended up writing it. It turned out to be a huge amount of work, which surprised me. But so it is. And so in this example, I'm saying, yeah, but don't just put it in, but actually put it in as an array with these addresses. So now what it said is, okay, I'm still, look at the previous one, put it in at position 2 right there. I'm still going to hit that position, but I'm instead, by the nature of specifying multiple array dimensions here, it took care of that for me. And see, it said, okay, you obviously want to create an array and you want it to be at the first position because it starts with 0. And that's why that is. We can also take it a step deeper. Here I'm saying 2, 2, and 2. So now I'm going an extra array level deep here dimensionally, right? It just takes care of it. Yeah. Oh, one final one. What if I want to push something else like an object in? So here I've made an object. Let's say let object. I just made the world's simplest object, fruit peach, right? And I want to put fruit peach in there at that position. It'll do that also. So yeah, and same thing. I could make this more complicated here if I wanted to, right? And it would be happy to do that. Notice I wrapped it in format 2D. If I'd instead have done it format elements, then it would do that. Which one could argue that's actually more useful to see it that way, because you can see the nesting for the dimensionality on the arrays. We're almost done with this section. So, oh, this was a fun one. What I found was when I was grabbing currencies, getting currencies. Oh, by the way, I should mention there is a blog article here. JSON currency exchange rates v3 on here on the resource page. Okay, we're talking about that. You have to get an API key, but it's free. So yeah. So anyway, so the issue was FileMaker's JSON loves to use scientific notation. If you sneeze, it switches to scientific notation. But I really wanted all of these. I wanted an apples to apples comparison on everything.
Yep.
And so so I wrote JSON force standard notation to make it go to standard notation. When I said that FileMaker's JSON functions really want to use scientific notation on things like that. If we go the other way, I'm going to go to example 2. So now my input is the one that I just produced with the output on example 1. So this here, right, with this the way I want it, is now the input on the nested example. Okay. So I set this up. I copied and pasted, right? If I'd have tried to use a JSON function to make this, it would have flipped it back. But then what I'm doing here is I'm showing that if I use JSON get element on this and pull it, it's going to throw it back to scientific notation again, right? So yeah. So just again, that's kind of nerdy. Like, who cares if it's scientific notation? Well, maybe it's because you're looking at this and you want to compare apples to apples as you look at these things. Most of us are not very good at converting something like that to this in our heads. Yeah. Yeah, I have another article that's just on forcing scientific notation, or forcing standard notation, and it's not just for JSON, and that's linked to. So this is a problem I have, is sometimes I'll say, well, you go to this article, and then once you get there, you follow this other link. See that article, right? So now we're one away. We're in the currency exchange rated article, and there's the earlier article there. Yeah, so then I'm gonna cut short what I was about to show just because I can see things are not going quite as fast as we wanted to. But yeah, I want to show at least one thing from here. So I have this thing that says take the found set and make an array of objects from it. And then if we look in the data viewer, we'll see that we have a JSON found set to an array of objects. So one of the things
that's cool.
Yeah, it just does it, right? It looks at the fields on the layout and again, uses that JSON get value type custom function as an internal engine. So notice Pennsylvania zip code can be a number because it doesn't have a leading 0. But if we get to place, oh, did I not have it in my found set? Hang on. You can take my word for it. If it was New Jersey or New England, oh, there's one. It'll cast it as text so it can preserve the leading 0. Because if it cast it as a number, we would lose 0. So yeah, and then on that happy note, there we go. So JSONQuery, let's actually start with some slides. Okay, so JSONQuery is written by Steve Santorera, and he has a GitHub page, and that's also documented on the FileMaker Hacks page. So what's JSONQuery? Well, guess what? It operates on JSON. Steve works with a bunch of wonderful people at Beeswax, and this is from his bio page on the Beeswax website. And he's an animal lover, which makes him okay in my book. So then, anyway, JSONQuery, you point it typically at an array of objects, right? So this is its sweet spot. It loves arrays of objects or arrays of arrays. So in case this isn't clear, when we see something like this, in FileMaker parlance, oh, these rows represent records, and this object is one individual record. That's what we're typically talking about, and that would be true actually here with an array of arrays as well. It's just a question of whether we see key names or not. So that's the sweet spot for JSONQuery. Anyway, you pointed at these things, and so it brings back the response to what your query was. What returns what you were asking for. So as an example, if you've got a 2-dimensional array, FileMaker gives us JSON get elements. We easily get a row, right? That is very easy. And here I am showing, right? 0, 1, 2. I'm asking for row 2, 0, 1, 2. And there it's returned it to me. But they don't give us a way to get a column. Fortunately, JSONQuery does. Okay, so it does 3 things effectively. Lets you query. It does aggregating, so you can do summing, averaging, etc. of values, right? And it can be either everything or just what matches your query parameters. And transformations. So you can start with one kind of JSON, slice and dice it, and come out with something else.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got a ton of pages referencing JSONQuery because I've written about it a lot. Steve and I have talked about it on several occasions. We've done YouTube presentations, or we've done user group presentations that have shown up on YouTube. So anyway, so I'm not going to spend much time talking about what's going on there. I'm just going to show some examples of what it can do. But the one thing I do want to point out is he gives you a wonderful demo file. And I'm showing a beta now because there's going to be a version 2.1 soon. 2.0 came out a few months ago. And he said, yeah, sure, you can. Not only am I showing it here, but I'm including this beta version in all the demo files that will be downloaded. I'll fix that once JSONQuery 2.1 official comes out. I'll put the real version back in the files. But for now, this is what we've got. So I'll just point out that the standard thing is it's got 4 panels. And the other thing I'll say about it, just because it's so amazing. Let's see, how do I scroll? I guess I'll move my window instead. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, here we go. Here we go, right? So when you come in here, it's got this about screen. That's then it's got sort of a reference sheet explaining how to use the high level stuff. You're like, oh, this is still kind of confusing maybe. This amazing filtered portal here, and every one of these you can click and go to that example. right? So you either show everything, or like maybe you just want to know about what he can do with the data API, right?
Wow.
Or
Okay.
so this is really useful, right? To help zero in, like, oh, I'm like, oh, Kevin said it can do transformations. Maybe I should go look at this. So he's got this. You can think of this. This is like this encyclopedic reference. Click on something, you get some information about it. So the basic thing, but I'm going to go back to an easy one, to an easier example, one that's easier on the eyes and the brain. Getting started. Okay, here we are at the beginning, right? 4 panels. Here's your query. Here's just some human-friendly explanation. Here's the input. And then when you click run example, you'll get a result, and it tells you how much was returned, how long it took. Okay, so just this has been covered in great detail in the interviews that I've done with Steve and in the video presentation. So I'm not going to dwell on it, but I'm
Okay.
going to mention it. Okay.
Well, that's good because it exposes it. There are people here who haven't seen those interviews. So yeah.
Right, of course, but they can track them down, right?
Yep. Now that they, especially off your website, it's all on as a blog article on FileMaker Hacks, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a whole bunch of articles, and I showed it on that page on the
On that
resource
one
page.
page. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so I made a JSON query sandbox, and I'm not going to necessarily show all these examples, but here we go, right? So I've got this array of objects here. It comes from restcountries.com, and it's got one object for each country in the world. Okay, and so I'd sort of like to know, well, what countries are in there, right? So each of these objects has name. So I'm telling JSONQuery, hey, reach into this big array of objects, right? Match everything. Notice, oh, there's always 6. There are always 6 arguments to JSONQuery. After a while, you just get used to it, and you don't need this as a guide to tell you, but this is useful just to help us now.
Okay.
And I'm telling it, give me everything, but don't return everything. Otherwise, my output would be the same as my input, right?
Right.
Just return me the name, right? Now, what does it do? It will try to return it to you as an array of matching entries. And that makes sense, right? Bring me back. So now I've got an array, but instead of everything, it's just an array showing the names. But maybe I don't want an array. Maybe I want a list. So JSONQuery has a list operator within it, right? So I'm asking the same exact question, but I'm telling it, bring me back things in a different format. So it's subtle, right? But one was an array of names, and the other is just a list of names. Now, maybe I don't want the whole world. Maybe I just want to look into Oceania, which is a region, right? There's a region here. And maybe I would say, hey, go look at the region. Find me entries where the region is Oceania, and bring back the name for those.
There you have it.
Right.
Nifty.
Yeah. Now, sometimes people say, yeah, but I don't just want Oceania. I want to know Oceania where the population is over 1 million. Just bring me back those. So JSONQuery does not have a sort of way to ask OR questions in that respect of query different fields at once, different keys at once. So what you do is you use the pizza cutter metaphor. Okay. The way it is on the first slice, you ask one question, that brings back a certain set of results. Then you point your next question at the response from the first one. So my first slice was just to get the region as Oceania. This is exactly the same as what we saw before, except I'm returning everything, not the names. Notice it doesn't say name here as the 6th argument.
I was about to notice that like it asked for the name on the second slice, not the first one.
Yeah, because I want to query, right? Slice 1 here. Let's look at slice 1, right? Well, slice 1 is what we saw here. No, slice 1 isn't, because it would be everything. Let's do it. Okay, slice 1, refresh. Now I've got just the objects that match Oceania, but it's not just the names, right? It's the entire thing.
So you can still hunt for population, and then after you finish hunting for okay, yeah.
Now I'm going to ask for population, and notice the trick with turns out with scientific notation, if you just want 1 million, that's a lot easier on the eyes than writing either of these things. With that, I have to look, is it 100,000 or 1 million, right?
Yeah, I have to count the
and
zeros.
This monstrosity is technically true, scientific notation, but why bother if you can do that instead, right? So I learned that trick from the JSONQuery author, Steve Santorera. Yeah, so this pizza slice thing will stand you in good stead when you use JSONQuery. And then what was this population where, and wait, what's the difference? Oh, bring
Just
back
give
the
you the exact
population.
population numbers of the
Just bring back the populations instead of the name, right? So it's almost identical query, but I returned the population instead, right? So it said, look, we're bringing back 3, but instead of the names, we're going to bring you back the populations for the 3. So then the natural next question would be, give me the sum of them, right? So when I do that, it adds the 3 together. See, I'm using sum there.
Mm-hmm.
So now instead of an array, it added those 3 numbers together for me. Now, once again, that's not easy on the eyes. So I'm going to use a trick. This isn't a custom function. This is just a unintended repurposing of FileMaker's num to J text, which is normally used with Japanese. And it turns out if I put 10 there, it'll put the commas in for me. So, and people are like, well, you just use comma format, because this is a text field. I can't apply number formatting to a text field. Okay, that's why. So yeah, so just a trick if you ever need to have it figure out the commas for you, and you don't want to write something that just counts the length and figures out where to place them, you can use the num to J text trick. Okay, what do we have here? Sum based on example treats. Oh, this is fun. Okay, so if I were to do JSON get element on this, notice that's a quoted number, whereas like here's a real number, right? It would JSON get element would say, hey, here's a 5. It might be a text 5, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just going to tell you it's a 5, right? And here's a 6, right? So, and then we've got some more down here. So we've got 4 numbers in here total, 5, 6, 4, 6, and I want to add them up, right? So the first thing is I would tell JSONQuery, hey, sum that, right? And again, this looks like gibberish at first, but you get used to it, and it's well documented in the JSONQuery resource file. So I click refresh 21, and it does. 5 and 6 is 11, 4 and 6 is 10, total is 21, right? But then you're like, wait a minute. I only want you to add up real numbers, not quoted text masquerading as a number, right? Not a quoted number. That's a string. Don't include that. So on our next example, notice this, look what he gave us, some number. It's smart enough to differentiate. You don't have to use some number. You can just say some if you don't care. But if you do care, it can figure this out. And by the way, Beverly was instrumental in helping Steve come up with some of these very nuanced ideas for things that JSONQuery could do. Here's another one. Okay, I've got a bunch of entries here, a whole bunch of entries, right? And then a few of them have missing phone numbers, right? Like this one, right? I want to find my missing phone numbers. So I click refresh and I tell it, bring me back the entries where phone is empty. And what's really cool here is it actually has 4 different interpretations of what could be empty. And I stack the deck by putting each of these in here, right? So see, all of those are considered empty. And on a related note, maybe I want to say, yeah, okay, that was fine, but now I need to run some kind of update routine and go patch those, right? So where are they, right? Okay, you showed them to me, but where are they? Path. Those are the addresses. You can see the 2, right? Remember, it's zero-based index.
Oh, okay. So it's telling you what number it is in the array. Got it.
Yep.
Yep, it's giving you the array address. So now I can run my JSON set element or whatever, or maybe, go scrubbing through there. By the way, if I was going to delete these, like, okay, they're garbage, just get them out of there, I would start here and work my way backwards. Because if I started here with JSON delete element and worked my way forward, as soon as I took 2 out, everything would slide. And the next address
commits
would be
before
wrong.
you actually get down to the Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I'm just pointing out, this is always the case when you're deleting JSON, that you want to start from the end and work your way backwards, right? Otherwise, positions will shift within an array, assuming we're talking about an array. If it was an object, no big deal, right? Because you'd be targeting it by name, but we're targeting it by position, right?
That's good to know. I'm very spoiled by FileMaker not committing things until I actually hit the commit, until I commit the record, so I can fiddle with stuff before it's all good.
Yeah. Here's one that's really cool. We're back to our country data. Yes, I agree. We're very spoiled by FileMaker in many ways. And if you ever use execute SQL or any other SQL, you quickly come to appreciate all the wonderful things FileMaker takes care of for us behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So we're back to our country again. And I'm not going to explain this or anything, but the challenge is I want to find just countries whose name begins with a vowel, A, E, I, or O, or U, right?
Okay.
So if I were to do this, right, in standard FileMaker, yes, right? With JSONQuery, you're always free to, I mean, you should understand, effectively, it's not doing anything you couldn't do with one or more while loops if you wanted to take the time to write them and debug them. Although sometimes it's faster. It's definitely faster in terms of once you get comfortable with it, you can do it more quickly than writing the while loop, but also its performance is often faster. I should point out, if I go back to the, oh, here, let me use my command back check trick. Oh, it doesn't work while you're in the field. Okay. Oh, maybe, oh, now I remember because I closed a whole bunch of things. Okay, if I come back to the JSON query file, I'll just point this out. And we go out to the overview, the reference sheet, optimized operators. Anything here is going to be faster than what you'll get with the equivalent while loop. Non-optimized operators means it's just going to behave about the same as if you wrote your own while loop. So there's really no penalty for using it. It's not going to be slower. It's just at worst.
So there's no operators that are worse. Okay.
Right. Right. So then coming back, now I can use my command backtick trick. There we go. And if we, so if I wanted to bring out just the names of the countries that start with a vowel, I could certainly do it with a while loop, right? Just check the 5. Look, there's my string, compare the left character. Do they match, right? I can do it. It works. Well, check. But now here's the JSON query version of that. The name begins with any of the following, and then you just give it a look.
Yeah.
Okay, right? Pretty cool.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and does it
That's
work?
nice.
Does it work? Yes, it works. Right? So, and then, maybe the next thing I'd be doing, especially since I wrote the custom function, right, is JSON sort array as text. Why am I doing that? To alphabetize them, because I see some of them aren't alphabetized down there, right? And then I won't waste our time on it, but obviously I could wrap it in another function to get the formatting back if I cared. So yeah, moving right along here. I'm gonna skip all the JSON LD stuff. Oh, this is kind of cool. Okay, so we have this big, busy, ugly JSON, right? It's what it is. It's festivals. Festivals have stages. Stages have sets. Sets have bands, right? What time are the blah, blah, blah. So it's very nested, right? And that's like, okay, well, what are the festival names? Boom, right? And then, okay, cool. So there's 3 festivals here in my festivals database. And then bands that have a specific history. Okay, yeah, I only want to see bands that have a triangle. I don't know about you guys. I'm a triangle aficionado. Right? You can never have too much. I wonder if cowbell's in there. Anyway, yeah. So
I mean, you can check real fast. I'm kind of curious now.
I certainly could, right? And then is it cowbell 1 or 2, right? Is it 1 or is it 2, right? And if it wasn't, of course, I could put it in. Let's see. Is it there? No. Darn. Okay. I won't be going to any of these shows. All right. Trumpet, right? Lots of trumpet. Okay. So then, oh, okay. So far we've got some examples that work on arrays here, right? We've been looking at arrays of objects, but now we're going to look at arrays of arrays. And so 2-dimensional arrays. So here, all I'm doing here is pointing out that we can bring it back as an, I'm going to grab the column, right? That was what I showed at the introductory slide. I want this column right here, right? I can bring it back as an array, or I can bring it back as a list. So I just put both of these on here, right? So same data, just how do I structure it? Okay, but that's what I did was I just extracted that column, starting from position 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is. Yeah. Oh, this is kind of fun, right? So we can do some data mining here, right? Using aggregation. So I'm saying, oh, I'd also want to point out match all is optional. If I leave quote, it will assume match all, right? But it used to, in version 1, you had to put it, but now you can leave it empty. And it says if you leave the third operator empty, then we're going to call it, then we're going to assume it, or the third argument, I should say, then we're going to assume match all. But I've spelled it out here. So
I'm glad you still have the option because it makes it more readable.
Oh yes, but yes, it certainly does, especially when you're not used to it, right? So so here I've got these match alls, right? And I'm basically saying, either count them or say I'm pointing everything at 1. So I'm pointing at this number, right? Because 0 is the URL, right? So I have a URL and a number, right? There's 2 elements in each inner array. And then I'm saying count them. Give me the smallest value, the largest value, the average value, and the sum, right? So there it is, right? Just analyzed that very quickly. And then maybe I also, hey, you know what? I want to find things where the URL contains a U. I don't care if it's upper or lowercase, just give me a U, right? So same question. Oh, and then show them to me while you're at it, right? So now we're just looking at the ones that have a U, upper or lowercase. You know, you can sort of see them here, right? But maybe I only want a lowercase u. So I'm going to do a contains case sensitive on it. And maybe while I'm at it, instead of returning an array, we returned an array of responses here. Maybe I just want to return a list of the URLs instead. So I'll list column 0. Let's see. Combining array entries. Oh, this is kind of fun. Sometimes you have arrays, like here we have a 4-dimensional array. So it's, and we're like, hey, could we like lose a level here and just take it back to 3? And so at first
Oh,
you like
that's
look at it.
cool.
Right. So basically just say, give me everything. We're like, well, if 3 would be good, 2 would be better, right? So now we're going to try this. We're like, could I just have it all in 1? 3, see?
Wow.
Yeah, so transformation. And then let's see. Oh, here's another one, right? In this case, same thing here. I want to turn all these into one array. Let's see. Oh, this is kind of fun.
Wow.
So then, remember I said there's always 6 arguments? The 6th argument can be a map.
Yes.
Okay. This is, and we had talked extensively in deep dive into the map construct right there. Okay, because it's a whole separate sub category of working with JSONQuery. Okay, so here it is, right? But check this out, right? I want to do some transformations on this right here. If it's very simple, right? But I want to transform it in various ways. Okay, so notice what I've done here. First, you're like, did it even change? Yeah, each of these names was in its own object, but notice we've lost that, right? So we brought it out a level. Here's another transformation on it, right? Just flip it around, right? And so once, again, I'm not going to explain all the details of it, but the point is there is a logic to it and you can read about it and learn it. And there's a ton of examples in the JSONQuery, this file, right? There's a ton of examples for maps, right? It's going to be in this output transformation section. Advanced map features, right? Map basics.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So then what else could we do? Extract just the key names, of course, right? And then, oh, and then I didn't even know what to call this. Generate this from this. Okay. There it is, right? So transforming JSON, because a lot of times what we get, you know, maybe we're working with an API and what we get isn't what we need to end up with. Maybe we need to transfer the JSON because we're passing it off to another API. I'm going to skip all that. So the, oh, this was kind of cool. Find countries that border Russia, right? So, right? So here, right, we got this, right? Look, here it is, right? How hard could it be? I need to find countries that border Russia, right? So the first thing I do, idea one, convert the borders array to a return. The problem is we can't do a wildcard search on the borders array. And the reason we can't is it doesn't have anything to, like, it doesn't have any unifying name or factor for us to search. It will not just do plain wildcard searches like that. So I had to come up with, I got its idea, right? Let's turn this into a return delimited list. So at first it's going to look exactly the same. You hear it, and but it's not quite the same because now instead of an array, that's a return delimited list. See the escaped R's there, right?
Ah, okay.
Right. Okay. So almost, but now I've transformed it so that becomes the slice here that I'm doing. And now I can say, show me things where borders contains RUS, right? Because we have a contains operator. So I do that, right? And list the names. And here comes the list of names of countries bordering Russia.
Do we want to have him back at some point? Because we're people are flaming out here. Their brains have exploded. In fact, you wiped out Beverly. So she said she had to get an adult beverage and she had to leave because she, she, her quote is, "I'm losing power, Kevin." And I don't think she's talking about out of the wall. I think you blew up her head. So
No, I'd already made a note, Kevin, that we're going to kidnap you again, whether you want to be kidnapped or not. I'm very sorry.
Yeah. But you know what? Look, you said I could go a little bit over, so I think I
Yes.
no, you're fine. I'm just letting you know that some of the people, we haven't had a lot of questions. We're going 5,000 miles an hour here. Corey, you have a question? If you have a question, we're going to let him keep going a little bit more. Yeah, people are saying bring you back, upvoting, bringing you back. Okay, great. We'll keep going, Kevin. I'm just letting you know that you're being
Yeah, you
requested
know what?
to.
Here's the thing. I want to get JSONQuery out of my system. So we
Okay,
have
let's do that.
4
Let's do
examples
that.
we're
Yeah.
going to look at, right? So I'll just point out something, right? That when we have an array of standardized data, like I have some of the major airports, major US airport data, right? It's sitting here, right? There it is, right? And now I'm thinking to myself, I'd like to clean this up. I'd like to, at first I wrote a custom function called JSON delete columns, and then Steve tactfully pointed out that JSONQuery could do that. So I'm going to pull out a couple columns and simplify this. And notice I'm starting with the higher one first for the reason we talked about. Because if I start with the lower one first, things would shift. And then my second deletion would be in the wrong place. So all I'm doing there is I'm just simplifying this. So now it's got fewer. And notice I made the first row my header, right? So, and I like that because a lot of times I want this to correspond to records in a FileMaker database.
Sure.
So address 0 is perfect for something that isn't a record. And then we start records with 1, right? Okay, so now I've cleaned that up. So the rest of my examples use that cleanup version, right? And then, so I want to alphabetize it, right? But I want to keep FAA on the top. So I did a little trickery in here to make that happen. And then, yeah, okay, so airports in California.
Oh, shit, yeah.
Right? I know that position 3 is California, 0, 1, 2, 3.
Hang on, I'm being buzzed by F-35s.
Here we are, right? So, okay, airports for California, and maybe instead we just want to get the airport codes. So before I said give me everything, so I got the entire row, but now I'm going to say just give me position 0, right? So it's just bringing me back the airport codes. Right? And then airports where the city's got less than 3,000 people in it. There they are. Airports where the cities have more than 2 million, right? So again, I'm using the scientific notation trick for my 2 million, right? Why did I get duplicate names here?
Because there's multiple airports in the cities. Yes,
exactly, right. And then yeah, so then let's distinctify it so we don't get the duplication. No, you know what? This is worth doing. Okay, so hang on. So here I decided, right, I just wanted to produce a simple array of objects that just was the airport code and the city that it corresponded to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then I thought I ought to be able to reverse that. Right? So like I'd like to do this exact thing, but flip it around. So it's city with airport code. Right? So I went to do it, right? Went to flip it around, and it won't work. Does anyone know why? In other words, it seemed to me, right? Like here I am, right? Source 0, 2, and now you can see the code. I've just reversed it. And I thought this should work, but it didn't. And then once I thought about it, it became obvious. Any guesses?
So you want to do city to airport code. Is it mad about duplicates?
Exactly. In JSON objects,
it is.
in JSON objects, the keys must be unique. But we already had established that we have some cities repeated. Right.
That's
so it's not going to do the impossible. You can't violate the laws of JSON. Right. Right. Look, error. Blah, JSONQuery just like puked. Right. Hey, at least it tried to tell us what happened. Right. And it showed the first match that caused a problem. So that's kind of cool. And then let's see. Now the values, all the other. Yeah. So these are just some transformations. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's particularly interesting here. Yeah, I think just to end up, I got a couple data API examples, right? So If you work with the data API, you're probably really used to this.
Mhm.
Okay, what I care about is the response data.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, now we've got an array of objects, right? The sweet spot, right? So step one, isolate. If we're going to use JSONQuery on this, we need to isolate the array of objects. So I'm clicking refresh here. Now it's everything below data, right? And that's going to be the sweet spot for JSONQuery. So then if we do that, that's what I'm doing up here, let array, and now that's just where I'm isolating it, right? Now I can ask some questions, right? So find entries where the description, this is winery data, so find entries where the description contains blanc and return the enclosing objects, right? So it goes through there and it's looking at what it got back from the data API, and it's figuring out which things have blanc, right? And then maybe I just want the names or the description, as they call it, instead of the whole thing. Produce an array of de-stringified objects. Have you ever had a field called as JSON, and then you returned it with the data API, and instead of getting back your nice pretty object, you got a stringified mess, right? So I purposely just have two of these. Notice return to count 2, right? Anyway, it's a problem, okay? It is a problem, right? So we've isolated the array, right? And then I'm like, okay, I got things back, but it wasn't what I wanted because I wanted JSON, but you gave me the stringified mess, which should be an object, right? But it isn't because the data API returns everything as string. Okay, so JSONQuery won't destringify it. It can isolate the two. So now I have an array of just the as JSON field, right there, but it won't destringify it directly. Turns out though, if I list it, now it's going to make me a list, but it's a list of JSON objects, but that is not in itself JSON, right? It's just a return delimited list with the two objects that are hanging out under field data. So it's like I solved one problem, but I still have another problem, which is this is not valid JSON here, right? If I were to say, if I tried to format this, it would kill it, right? It would go zip, sorry, not JSON, right? Fortunately, example 4, we can use good old JSON make array on that list.
Okay, so it'll.
And there we go. Now we have.
You could
so now we've
actually do something with
de-stringified.
it. Yes.
We use JSONQuery to help us isolate those as JSONs. And now we de-stringify it. So now we've got a proper array of objects, which is what we wanted.
Wow.
And I'm out of examples.
Well,
I don't think that's totally accurate, but we'll take you at your word for it.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of people are talking courses. It would be really useful in seeing some of this, how it'd be useful for exporting and allow the user to select what was exported. Lynn from Austin said, definitely like to see Kevin present exporting and filtering data based on user selections. You know, a lot of little comments on the chat, but there weren't a lot of questions, partly because you don't take a breath for oxygen very well. So what we call a pregnant pause on TV allows us to ask questions. But I think it's a lot of material and it was laid out very fast. And I think people are absorbing it. The fact they get the sample file, everyone's saying they're going to go back and look at the sample and watch the video again, which will be very helpful, I think, for them. So.
And I will say this, the other video presentations that we've done were more in depth and longer.
Oh, damn. All
About
right. Well,
JSON
then hopefully you have a caution warning. Following a material may be hazardous to your health.
Right. My heart.
No, you did a great job, Kevin. I
Thank
greatly
you.
appreciate it. And like I said, having you here has always been one of the goals for us. We have the key contributors to the FileMaker community that really moved the FileMaker community forward. Kevin is one of those. And his website, FileMaker Hacks, is it FileMakerHacks1word.com, right?
Yeah.
What that is?
That's it.
FileMaker, that you?
Yep,
There we
there you
go. Right on. So. Yeah. And so all the blogs the blogs, there's a good history in there. It's all well contained, but there's a lot of material just on this one, a lot of videos to watch. Once again, sometimes my job is not necessarily to teach everything, but just to kick people in a direction and they can continue their own learning if it's something that is helpful for them. Right. Hunter Blunkin says, I think there's a great overview of possibilities, which is what he would be doing at which is what he said he would be doing at the beginning. Yeah, absolutely. I think Kevin could present for 8 hours straight if you could pump him with enough caffeine and sugar to keep him motoring along. So,
All right,
Jason,
thank you.
yeah, JSON expert level 3. Yeah, David Angel. Yeah, absolutely. So Rex Arnie's there, a whole bunch of people there. Lusker's there, a whole bunch of folks. We greatly appreciate you coming to the live stream.
Thanks
Yes.
for having me. Yeah, we'll do it again.
We greatly appreciate it. All right, Margaret.
Yes.
Take
Have a
care.
good one, everybody. We will see
Bye,
you
guys.
shortly. Bye.